Jacob, Yaakov, asks his son Joseph, Yosef, the viceroy of Egypt, to swear that when Yaakov dies, Yosef will bury him. Previously, before Yaakov went down to Egypt, he was concerned, and God reassured him and said, Yosef will put his hand over your eyes. That's what God was referring to. He was reassuring Yaakov that he'd get a proper Jewish burial because Yosef would make sure of it. And that's what Yaakov wanted. He wanted somebody to watch his body after death and to bury him in simple linen shrouds. He wasn't interested in the Egyptian embalming techniques or in alternatives to burial, like cremation, that hideous practice that unfortunately at times is opted for even by Jewish families. I get sick whenever I hear a story about a Jew who opted for cremation, knowing that burial is the ultimate chesed shel emes. It's a kindness that we do for people that they can't repay. There are Jews and there are organizations that would gladly pay for the extra cost of burial, proper Jewish burial, rather than cremation. I know. You may have read Tuesdays with Maury and decided that Maury dispenses wonderful advice, but don't follow his lead in opting for cremation. You don't want your funeral to look like this?
In accordance with what we think your dying wishes might well have been, we commit your final mortal remains to the Pacific Ocean.
Rambam, Maimonides, explains that one of the central tenets of Judaism is a belief in resurrection, the time when the soul will be reunited with the body. And the Talmud has countless stories and descriptions of how the soul remains connected to the body after death, even to the extent that the departed can hear the words said about him or her at the funeral until the burial is complete, and that the soul continues to have a connection to that burial spot. But there's much more to Yaakov's request. Not only is he interested in making sure that he gets a proper Jewish burial, he wants to be buried in a specific place. He tells Yosef, don't bury me in Egypt. And then he repeats the instructions and amplifies them just before his death when he's speaking to all of his sons. He says, take me up to the cave that's in the field that my grandfather Abraham, bought from Ephron, to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, the double cave, the place where Avraham was buried, and where his wife Sarah was buried, and where my parents Yitzchak and Rivka were buried, and where I buried Leah. Now, do you think that Yaakov's sons did not know where their great-grandparents and their grandparents and their mother were buried? Of course they knew. All Yaakov had to say was, bury me in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. So why all the detail? Because he wanted to send them a message. Sons, I know how successful you've become in Egypt. And as the Torah points out, I know how attached you've become to the land. Don't make a mistake. Goshen is not Jerusalem. This is not our country. We only have one country, and it's Israel. And even if your only connection during the many years that you and your descendants are going to live in Egypt is that Israel is the resting place of your forefathers, let that be enough to keep your hearts there, to keep your minds there, and to eventually bring you back. And for us nowadays, Israel, of course, is still the resting place for our forefathers, but it's so much more with a vibrant Jewish nation there. And for those of us who aren't fortunate enough to live there, the least we can do is to visit and to support in any way we can, financially, politically, and in our prayers.